Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to my cozy little corner of the internet. My name is Sarah Ashworth, and in the previous episode, Jasper and Eric actually talked for the first time in years. In today's episode, we shall continue this intriguing story. So, grab your favourite beverage, sit back, relax, and I shall begin. Chapter 8. Reunion. A click could be heard as a key was turned in a lock. When the door was opened, Jasper's mother gestured for the two boys to go inside, before she stepped inside herself. After locking the door behind her, she followed the boys into the living room and made several hand gestures towards a phone, magically transporting it to her. She grabbed it and looked at the two. "How about we order pizza?" she asked them, smiling. It had been rough the last few days, and it was nice to be able to relax and have something good to look forward to. Eric and Jasper both nodded enthusiastically. Honestly, after everything they went through, they found themselves appreciating something as simple as pizza even more. "What pizza should we get?" she asked them. She wanted to make sure they knew what they wanted before calling. "I'm in the mood for a meat feast," Eric spoke up as Jasper nodded in agreement. "And plain cheese. Can't go wrong with a classic," Jasper chimed in. "Maybe some garlic bread, too." Jasper's mother simply laughed. At least the boys were more relaxed now. Things seemed so tense at the lighthouse. Of course, she was worried because her son had left without her knowledge. Still, things seemed to be all right for the moment. She dialed a number and walked around as Jasper and Eric sat down on the sofa to relax a little. They were just listening to Jasper's mother talking to the pizza place and giving their order, as well as the address for delivery. Another moment passed and she hung up. "It'll be 45 minutes, she informed the two. Jasper and Eric nodded in acknowledgement before standing up. "Let's go upstairs while we wait," Jasper suggested, leading Eric upstairs towards his room. Eric looked around with a smile on his face. "You and your mom have a nice home here," he commented, as he looked at several pictures on the wall that were of Jasper and his mother. He had to admit he was jealous of their relationship. "You're really lucky." Jasper paused as he heard those words. "Lucky? Right," he responded, as he looked down, though he didn't move. Eric simply blinked. "Am I wrong?" Jasper simply shook his head. "You're not wrong. I am lucky that I have a mother like her, and a nice place to call home," he answered. He was smiling, but his tone didn't quite match his facial expression. He turned to face Eric. "I just had to go through some things to get here." "Do you want to talk about it?" "Maybe someday, but not yet." "Well, whenever you're ready, I'm here." "Thanks," Jasper responded. He was truly grateful for Eric's offer, even though he had been horrible to him until very recently. "But for now, I think there are other things we need to talk about." The two continued on their way towards Jasper's room. When they arrived, Jasper opened the door with a slight creak and led the way inside. Eric looked around Jasper's room as the latter closed the door. "This room is definitely nicer than the one we had at the orphanage," she remarked, taking note of the pleasant but simple decor. "I'd say your taste has definitely changed." Jasper just shook his head and rolled his eyes. "People do change as they grow up," he uttered as he walked over to Eric. "I learned that you don't need the finer things in life to be happy." Eric just snickered at that. "Oh, please. You steal anything that wasn't nailed down." "Everyone always called you Magpie. I don't steal anymore." Jasper's face had gone red at that point. Okay, sure, he stole extra food when no one was looking, and extra blankets. He also stole some of the nicest things the adults had, but that was purely out of necessity. At least, that was what he told himself. But he didn't have to do that anymore. "This is an odd-looking book," Eric called out as he picked up Jasper's spellbook from the table. "Be careful with that," Jasper shouted as he rushed over and gently took the book from Eric's hands. "This is my mom's. She gave it to me so I could learn and practice spells." "So you went beyond sleight of hand tricks?" "Hey, I was good at those." "I didn't say you weren't. It's great to see that you're doing actual magic. How about we just get to the topic at hand?" "All right," Eric uttered as he went to sit on Jasper's bed. "We only hear the song at night," he mused as Jasper was looking for something in his desk drawers. "Which, if you're trying to lure someone away without being noticed, it makes sense." "True. Though it only started after you showed up on the island," Jasper pointed out, as he finally found what he was looking for, his notebook. "So we have to assume that you're the intended target," he added, as he walked over to Eric and held out the notebook. "When it first started, I began to take notes, when I was following you around that day." "Yeah, we need to talk about that," Eric remarked as he looked at the notebook. "Though I'll admit, you made some pretty impressive notes." "Well, I am part of the school paper. It's kind of my job to take notes when I'm investigating things." So, when all this is over, does that mean you'll be putting it in the school paper? I'm not sure. I've always wanted to start a supernatural blog, Jasper admitted as he looked through the notes with Eric. I just needed a good story to get it to take off. But this one is just a little too close to home. Eric just hummed quietly in response before he finally handed the notebook back to Jasper. How come you never kept in touch? Jasper suddenly blurted out the question, taking the redhead completely by surprise. What do you mean? Eric questioned. He blinked his eyes, clearly confused at the question, and why Jasper would even bring it up now of all times. I sent letters to you every week. I tried to call at least once a day, but I never got any response from you. Jasper looked down in silence. He was unsure what to say to that. All this time he believed that Eric had forgotten all about him and didn't stay in touch with him at all. But this was something else entirely. All this time Eric had tried to reach him, but he didn't remember receiving anything from Eric. No letters, phone calls, or anything of the sort. I'm sorry, Eric. I didn't receive anything from you at all, Jasper admitted as he finally looked up at the redhead. Did you get anything from me? Now it was Eric's turn to be puzzled. No, I didn't. I just assumed you were still angry with me for leaving. Jasper sighed as he leaned back. Is it possible that someone was just keeping us from communicating with each other? He found himself asking. It was the only thing that made sense. How was it they were both trying to communicate with each other and not receive anything? Eric let out a small hum as he seemed to contemplate the possibility. I have heard about kids who are adopted, sending letters to their friends who were left behind. He spoke up. So it's not like it's a regular thing. He looked up at the ceiling and sighed. Was she really doing that? He thought to himself. Was she really stopping me from communicating with Jasper? I'll admit, I was pretty angry at you at first, Jasper spoke up. There was a lot on his chest that he wanted to get out. But after some encouragement, I decided to try and be happy for you and get in touch. He laughed weakly and shook his head. But when I didn't hear anything back from you, I thought that maybe you had already moved on. Eric was silent at this revelation. All this time, Jasper resented him for leaving without so much as a word, but he thought that he had deliberately cut all contact with him, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Though in all honesty, he believed that Jasper didn't contact him either, and was also quite resentful. But his resentment seemed to lessen over the years, and he thought that maybe it was the same for Jasper too. Still, it was good that they were talking about this and getting their feelings about it in the open. After an eternity of awkward silence, a dry laugh escaped from Eric. We were kids back then. We didn't really know any better. He paused for a moment before he smiled at Jasper. I'm glad that we're having this talk now. Jasper chuckled and nodded. Me too, he agreed, as he looked down at his feet. I was getting tired of keeping all that anger and resentment. It's good to get it out. Before Eric could respond, there was a knock at the door. Jasper got up and went to open the door to see his mother there holding a box of pizza. The pizza arrived, she cheerfully announced as she gave Jasper the box. I thought you boys might want to have it up here. Jasper smiled as he held up the box. Thanks, Mom. Eric smiled at her too. Thanks, Miss Ashford. Please, call me Rosemary, she told him in a friendly tone. Miss Ashford is far too formal. Eric nodded. I understand. And thanks again, Miss Rosemary. She struggled at his little slip-up, but she genuinely wanted him to feel welcome, especially since he was a friend of Jasper's. Oh, before I forget, I also brought these up for you. She spoke as she levitated pillows, blankets, and a duvet into the room, and set it all down neatly by the foot of Jasper's bed. Thanks, Mom. This is awesome, Jasper told her, grateful to her for letting Eric stay on such short notice. Again, sorry for asking on such short notice. It's okay. I know you've been under a lot of stress lately, but next time, give me a little more notice, okay? I will, he promised her as he leaned in to hug her. All right, I'll leave you both to it. I'm sure you want to talk about things that an old lady like me wouldn't understand. She joked, though it made Jasper's face turn bright red from embarrassment. She still had it in her and was proud of herself for that. But before Jasper could say anything, she left the room and closed the door. Jasper carried the pizza to the bed and sat down, placing it between himself and Eric. They opened the box and shared the pizza. There were several moments of silence as they ate, clearly enjoying such a rare treat. When they had finished, Jasper walked over to his desk and placed the empty box there before returning to the bed and sitting back down. Reminiscing about the past has been eye-opening, but we should really think about coming up with a plan, Jasper spoke up, wanting to get them back on track after losing themselves in the past. Granted, it was necessary to clear the air, but they needed to focus on the here and now. That meant dealing with the hypnotic song that would hold them firmly in its grip every night. You're right, Eric agreed as he stood up and paced around the room. We have to do something, otherwise it'll haunt us for the rest of our lives. We have to find the source of it, but we won't be able to do that while we're both under its effects. The two paced around, racking their brains to come up with suggestions. We could try making ourselves deaf, Jasper suggested as Eric paused for a moment. That could work, but there's one problem with that. The redhead spoke as he turned to look at Jasper with a thoughtful expression. It wouldn't help us find the source of the voice. All right, we'll only deafen one of us, and they keep an eye on whoever isn't deaf. Jasper mused as he sighed. That sounded better in my head. You have a point, though. Do you have any earplugs or anything like that handy? I have something better, Jasper answered as he went to his desk and grabbed his spellbook. Eric looked curiously as Jasper brought the spellbook over and started going through the pages. I know it's in here somewhere, he muttered half to himself as he continued to flit through the pages until he found what he was looking for. Here it is. Sound-dampening spell, Jasper called out victorious as he pointed towards the spell. Eric examined the spell and saw the various hand gestures. It looks like the spell can reach different radiuses depending on the hand signs. Jasper nodded. We only need to do it at a personal level, he answered as he looked at it nervously. What's wrong? Eric questioned, giving him a concerned look. I've never used this spell before, Jasper admitted with a nervous chuckle. I only glanced at it. Eric nodded, though he gave the book a slight frown. Maybe we should stick to earplugs. Jasper shook his head stubbornly as he gripped the sides of the book tightly. No, I need to practice, and this will be the perfect opportunity, he reasoned. Ever since he was a kid, he had always felt the need to prove himself. It didn't matter if it was to his own detriment. He was determined. Eric laughed a little and held his hands up. All right, if you say so, was all he said on the matter before he walked over to the window and pulled the curtain slightly to look outside. It's starting to get dark, he warned as he turned to face Jasper. It's now or never. Jasper nodded and placed the book down flat so he could easily read it. Come here, so I can cast a spell on you. Now it was Eric's turn to be stubborn. A spell like that can be cast on yourself, right? Jasper nodded. Yeah. Why? You should use it on yourself, Eric suggested without skipping a beat. He had a feeling Jasper would say no, and he didn't want to argue. He simply took a deep breath as he anticipated Jasper's inevitable protest. No, I won't leave you vulnerable to that bewitching song, Jasper cried out, clenching his fists in frustration. I could use the spell on you to protect you instead. Eric let out a light chuckle. There it was, just like clockwork. Jasper always had a habit of protesting when things didn't go his way. This time was no different. He couldn't explain why it had to be him to take the necessary risk, but he shouldn't have to. It was his mess to clean up. It was his responsibility to fix. Jasper was dragged into it through no fault of his own. He couldn't risk anything happening to him again. He slowly turned to face the now shaking Jasper, calm as could be. Don't argue with me, Jasper, he commanded, probably for the first time in his life. He was always a follower, going along with what others wanted. Now, it was his turn to take charge, and Jasper just had to deal with it. We don't have much time left. Jasper just stared at Eric dumbstruck. The once quiet and shy kid who he had bossed around as a kid was now doing the same thing to him. He wasn't sure how to feel about it. Annoyed? Proud? Somewhere in between? He took a breath, taking in what he heard and saw. Not for the first time he was seeing Eric in a new light. Out of all the time for you to grow a backbone, he remarked, shaking his head with an amused smile. You had to choose now. He was met by a small chuckle and a light tap to the shoulder. We should get some drinks, Eric suggested. We want to keep as hydrated as possible. Jasper stared at Eric suspiciously. Not long ago he was saying that time was of the essence, but he figured there was no point in arguing about it. With a nod, he left the room and went downstairs to get drinks. Once Jasper's footsteps faded down the stairs, Eric started to look around the room a little more until he spotted a cupboard over Jasper's desk. Curious, he took a closer look and saw several bottles containing different coloured liquids. On the bottles were neatly written labels, and Eric couldn't help but smile. It wasn't like Jasper to be so organised. He found himself reading the labels, and he stopped at one that piqued his interest. Sleeping potion, he read the label. Just a few drops for a full night's sleep. He looked around, making sure the coast was clear, and quickly grabbed the bottle and put it in his hoodie pocket. Eric stepped away from the desk and returned to the bed to sit down just as Jasper returned, carrying the drinks. Eric quickly stood up and went to help Jasper with the drinks. Thanks. Hope you're okay with soda, Jasper spoke gratefully. Eric nodded. Yeah, that's fine, he responded as he placed the drinks on the desk. Jasper made his way to the bed to grab the spell book. As he did so, Eric quickly took the potion bottle out of his pocket and poured a couple of drops into one of the drinks. It made a little hissing noise, but thankfully, Jasper didn't hear it. Jasper took a breath and began to copy the hand gestures in the book to start the spell. He felt the magic flow through him and out of his hands, circling him for it was focused slowly around his head. After a moment it faded, and Jasper shook his head. The sounds around him had grown faint, like his head was permanently under water. It was a strange sensation, one that he found uncomfortable, as he shook his ear out of pure instinct. He looked around and saw Eric approach, though his footsteps were muffled. Are you okay? Eric's words were drowned out by the spell, and he could barely hear. That was good. It meant the spell was working, though he could read Eric's lips and was able to figure out what he was saying. Jasper smiled and gave Eric a thumbs up. It feels weird, but it seems to be working. He talked much louder than usual. The downside of the spell seemed to be that he couldn't quite control the volume of his voice. I feel like I'm underwater constantly. No need to yell. I'm not deaf, Eric joked as Jasper glared at him. Still, I'm glad it works. You'll definitely be protected from that song. Jasper took a moment to read Eric's lips to determine the rest of what he was saying before he nodded, even though he thought that he should be doing more to help. This was probably the best way. Besides, Eric wouldn't have it any other way. He just had to do his best to stay awake and make sure Eric didn't get hurt while he was under the song's influence. In all the excitement, he realized that he hadn't drunk anything in a long time, and he was glad that he went and got the drinks when he did. He walked over to the desk and grabbed one of the drinks and took a sip from it. He went to sit down on the chair at his desk and gestured to his bed. Feel free to lie down if you want, he offered. You need to rest up too. Eric decided not to argue with the offer and grabbed the remaining drink and went to sit down on the bed. He took a sip of his own drink and started to relax as he watched Jasper drink from his own cup. Jasper began to feel drowsy, and despite his best efforts to stay awake, he couldn't. As his eyelids drooped, he saw Eric leaning close, and his lips move. However, he was too tired to figure out what Eric was saying. Soon enough, his eyes closed, and he passed out in his seat. That is the end of today's episode. I can't believe I'm at episode 8 already, and I love that you all stuck around. It means a lot to me. So Jasper and Eric really talked about their childhood, and Jasper's resentment of Eric stemmed from a misunderstanding. Was it an accident, or was someone sabotaging their communication efforts? In any case, I'm glad that Jasper and Eric were able to sort out their differences and come up with a plan. Only for Eric to drug Jasper with his own sleeping potion. What are you doing, Eric? Jasper wanted to help. If you want to find out what Eric is up to, and if Jasper wakes up on time to catch him, then tune in to the next episode.